Hello, and welcome to the Argyle SMB Finance Leadership Forum. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit the virtual booth from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Shwetha T, Chief Financial Officer, VCM Products. We are excited to have Shwetha and our speaker with us for a fireside chat titled Technology Investments for Financial Safety and Success. Welcome, Shwetha. Over to you.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here for, as Nick mentioned, to talk about the critical role of technology in how we can transform, how technology can transform small businesses. As finance leaders or CFOs, often we're at the forefront of steering our organizations through the rapidly evolving landscape of financial management, as well as the business landscape. Today, we want to talk about how technology can be not just a tool, but a pivotal element in how we can drive efficiency, accuracy, and strategic decision-making in small businesses. We'll talk about how the latest technology trends and also how it impacts things like accounting, compliance, budgeting, forecasting, et cetera. So without further ado, let me introduce Tosan A to the forum. He is an expert in financial technology. And Tosa, please feel free to introduce yourself, and then we can get started.
Oh, thanks, Shwetha. Thanks for the kind words on using the word expert. My name is Tosan A, and amongst other things, I've had about a decade or so in strategic planning, financial planning, and analysis, mostly within the technology finance space or the technology industry. Started my technology finance journey at Texas Instruments from the hardware space, semiconductor manufacturing, the connected microcontroller space, which in lay terms is, think the Internet of Things, the semiconductors that power the Internet of Things. Moved on to JP Morgan, where I helped build and lead the cybersecurity FP&A space, was responsible for the investment governance within the cybersecurity space, which is a couple of $1 billion. It's not public, so I'll just use that. A couple of $1 billion within the 12 billion or so that JP Morgan spends on global technology annually. And of recent, and most recent, I've led the FP&A space for Equinix, which is a data center provider. They're the largest co-location data center company in the world. And my job is essentially to look at investment, spend, operating efficiency within the core data center space. And on top of that, I'm also a certified information security manager. So I like the technology space, and I tend to, it seems like that's where I sit in that intersection of finance, operation, and technology, and hopefully want to learn from this conversation too as we apply this into the small business landscape.
Yeah, this is wonderful. What a great and varied, background, Tosa. Just to clarify, I should have mentioned my background for everybody. So I'm currently CFO of a small consumer products company called VCM Products. We are private equity owned and based in Ohio. We are also, but prior to this, I've worked for a majority of my career in investment banking in New York City. And then I moved from investment banks to corporate finance, where I was doing a lot of M&A, corp dev, FP&A as well, Tosa, like you. But and then I moved over to the Midwest, and I was doing corporate FP&A. I was heading up corporate FP&A for a few healthcare centers here, healthcare companies here. But then I switched about 7 years ago. I've been in this space for more than 20 years now, but about 7 years ago, I switched into startups. And I had my own startup for a while, but then what I realized is my passion is really to help others utilize financial management to make strategic decisions. So, and startups and small businesses are often lacking in those skills. So I worked as a fractional CFO for a while. For startups, for small companies, et cetera, and then moved into my current role here. So it's been a journey for me, but I'm very passionate about, of course, all the tools that are available, but also about small businesses, startups, SMB world in general, because I think finance plays even more of a pivotal role there than what I've seen in the beginning, early, part of my early half of my career, where I was in very large companies, and I saw finance being very critical, but not quite as as capital strapped as they are in small businesses. So this is where technology can come in to help us. So very excited to chat. So let me get started with kind of, the first question, of course. Tosa, given your background, what are some of the big current trends that you're seeing in the marketplace right now?
Sure. We'll touch on that. I just want to build on something you said. Finance has evolved we've always been the custodians of the numbers, a little bit more than accounting. Accounting accounting is the language of business, and a good financial professional has to understand that language. But the finance professional has always been the custodian of the numbers, and in a world where technology is playing more and more of a critical part, our ability to understand how those numbers and the data that is being generated by technology translates to, quite frankly, what everybody cares about is the bottom line. How does it make me more money, or how does it save me money? Our ability to be the translators or mediators, sitting at that, holding that tension, so to speak, between what our technology partners want to go invest in and what the business can actually afford, is what is going to set the finance professional apart from your peers. You've been able to speak to both sides of the coin. But to your question as to what are the big evolving trends, we can start a bingo game by anytime I say the word AI. but that's what is on everybody's lips. I was watching the recent summit at Davos, and it seemed like every interview, regardless of what industry the CEO or C-suite executive was speaking from, AI was always on their lips. So much so that some of these industries, like, kept on, quite frankly, going, AI doesn't make sense here. But if you're not speaking AI in this day and age, the street looks at you like something is wrong with you.
Yeah.
I think, especially in the small business context, you need to kind of scale AI back and look at it more in terms of there's a high evolution in productivity tools. Everybody's trying to do more with less. When I came into the game, just having the ability to manipulate pivot tables in Microsoft Excel was seen as like the end all be all. Then it evolved into, VBA macros and SQL being kind of like the golden child. Now, if you at minimum don't have Power BI tools or some kind of automation, understanding of tools like Alteryx, or workforce planning tools like Anaplan. As a senior financial analyst coming into the game, you're a little bit behind the ball, the eight ball a bit. So it's mostly productivity tools that are pushing. Most of the productivity tools in that are trending right now seem to be more focused on cost optimization and data processing more than anything, just because of the volume of data that has been generated, regardless of industry or the size of your business. And most C-suite or leaders in the business are essentially looking for tools that can help return more to the shareholder at less cost. Or that can, again, not just generate short-term gains, but sustainable long-term gains. The good news is these tools are going to continue to evolve. The bad news is these tools are going to continue to evolve. So once you think you've mastered something, wait 2 years, you're going to have to recertify, relearn, remaster, which gives an advantage to the finance professional that comes to stuff like this and, keeps that learning hat on.
So how do you kind of stay on top of the eight ball, like you said? What are some kind of tricks and tips that you've found over the years really helps you say, okay, look, I know it's evolving, but I'm going to build this in a way that keeps me, even as it evolves, it'll help me keep current or keep switching cost lows. Like, what are some thoughts around how do we stay on top of this? Like, technology is changing so fast.
I would, my big answer to that is a non-technological answer. It's very human, because there's so much out there technology-wise that, first of all, trying to figure out what you need to stay on top of, it's its own challenge. So the human answer to that is I am in lockstep with my business partners, right? There are certain SMEs within your company, the true technology professionals. I may have a certificate in information security management, but I am not the cybersecurity expert, right? But I'm the finance person to that cybersecurity expert. And through monthly conversations outside of our usual BAU, business as usual monthly processes, just curiosity in what is that individual seeing? What would that individual want his business partner or her business partner to bring to the table? Gives me a guidepost to which resources, which industry resources. A simple question like, if you were me, what would you want me to know, right? Could direct you to go read this versus that, right? Or to go look at this certification versus that certification. Because the one thing you don't want to do is invest time in gaining knowledge that is not applicable to your particular situation. The other thing I do, and all these algorithms are getting smarter and smarter, if you subscribe to some publications like the Bloombergs and the Wall Street Journals of the world, you can customize kind of like the news feed that gets fed to you from a particular domain, right? So one of the reasons why I joined Equinix is they're investing a lot in Nigeria and Africa, right? So one of the newsfeed customizations I did in Bloomberg was technology in Africa,
right?
To very customize, and it keeps you on trend with what is most applicable to either your core company or, quite frankly, your core interest. The third thing I would say is don't try and be the know-it-all. You can't, so give yourself some grace. Understand that there are some people within your teams, you can almost divide and conquer, right? Yeah. If I want to go do a certification in I don't know, Python, right? Somebody else within my team can go become the Power BI expert. Both of us together can become a more well-rounded finance team, not having all of the knowledge sit with one person.
That's a really good point. So when you're looking at it in that perspective and kind of that paradigm of, hey, we're going to use technology to kind of supplement some of the skill sets and things like that. The broader question then becomes, well, what is the role of finance with this technology? How does technology, or I should ask it a different way, how does technology change the role of finance within a company?
It impacts it like everywhere else. It impacts finance probably second to operations. Technology probably impacts finance the most, right? Whereas operations uses technologies more than anything to drive efficiency. From a finance perspective, we need to be able to translate that efficiency to the top line and also the bottom line. I also think with finance, if you do it well, let's split technology into two broad categories, right? There's your internal technological products and processes, which quite frankly should be every finance professional should embrace.
Yeah.
Yeah, in order to give you some hours of your life back, right?
Yeah.
Reduce some of your monthly close, the things that are rote and repeatable. Can you stick them into, again, depending on the size of your business, some kind of Oracle dashboard that ties off your books relatively quickly, leaving you to be more of a reviewer more than anything. Then, of course, there's the external, which the company needs to make the decision on, either to drive sales or increase growth or reduce customer acquisition costs or, what have you.
Or just improve cash flow. I mean, for
Yep.
small companies, especially private equity owned, cash is
Cash is
very
king.
much king.
Yes. Yep.
So a lot of technology is just, hey, can we lower transaction costs and switching costs so that we can track cash flow better, enhance cash flow, reduce our days receivable, increase our payable days, whatever it is.
Yep. Because in a small business environment, every dollar counts, right?
Yeah.
And what a finance professional, I used to tell this to my team, that you're mini CFOs, I don't care what your title is, and your job is to enable and control, all right? It's to enable what the business objective and control for outcomes, right? And what in this technological age, what the finance professional needs to be able to do is, without having to put every single spend request through a business case, you almost need to be able to, on the spot, do an ROI matrix in your head to determine, does this align to the overall goals of the company, and does it give the returns that we need to meet a certain cost of capital threshold, which will ensure that our cash flow goes up.
Or even like error reduction, right? Or enhanced data security. I mean, the benefits are, you have to think broader, to your point. When you're thinking about investments and finance, technology kind of investments, it has to be broader than just productivity.
It does. And from the control part, your position as a finance professional, quite frankly, sometimes is to say no. Right? The business is going to be enamored by all the shiny things out there. Right? Everybody wants this new shiny tool and all that stuff. But you're a business of 50 employees, like, you don't need Anaplan.
Right.
At this point in your development, maybe later, soon, but not right now. And that's where the human part of all of this comes in. The relationships and the equity you've built in those relationships will put you in a position to be able to tell your business partner, no, and let's try it this way, right? It's never, in my mind, it should never be a no period. It's a no and have we thought about this? And no and let's test pilot this. And no and you build on that relational equity that is going to be a differentiating factor in this day and age of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. And that approach of not jumping in also addresses some of the biggest risks of technology, which is on the other side, safety, data control. And as the kind of the safeguards or the guardians of data within the company, you know, at least the financial data, what
Mhm.
are some of the things? I mean, what I've seen is that's one of the biggest worries is, hey, is it secure? How are we? And we don't have, you know, for small companies, we don't have the luxury of investing in having, you know, like JP Morgan spends a lot on cybersecurity, like we were talking about earlier. Things like that. Like we wouldn't have that kind of luxury. We wouldn't have that.
Mhm.
So what are some of the things that you would say is important when thinking about kind of the security risk of technology and how do we mitigate that?
Sure. So in cybersecurity domains, there's one in particular that will be most pertinent to small businesses, which is information risk management, right? And considering, it's dependent on your industry. So if you're a small business that has access to personal identifying parameters, or has access to credit card transaction data and what have you,
Yep.
your bar is increased in terms of what your risk management tolerance should be.
Right.
The couple of ways one can do that, because you don't have as a small business, you don't have the capital to secure it yourself, is to offload the liability to a vendor or partner. And now vetting the vendor and ensuring that the vendor um, that helps process your credit card transaction or your billings and collections, that shows those personal identifying markers and what have you, that becomes a core process that hopefully you take your time to ensure that the vendor that you're giving access to your data, has all of that liability insurance and things of that nature around it. Um, the second part for a small business that's probably most critical is your internal controls from a personnel perspective. Who has access to that data internally, right?
Yeah.
How much access? There's a tiered access system. CFO probably has access to everything, right? But the senior analyst should be walled off in some areas
Yeah.
to grant them access to do their job, but not the full, cash flow statement and the banking information of,
Well,
of the
and
business.
having just, you know, kind of that backup of one person, not one person doesn't do end-to-end anything, right? End-to-end process. So
Yeah.
like,
And there's a tension you're going to have to manage, because one person not doing end-to-end and anything, one, you have to build some resiliency in there so that if this person doesn't show up, the whole chain doesn't fall apart. But the other tension is having to, I do part of the work, I transfer to another person, that person does part of the work and transfers to another person. There will be some inherent inefficiency that shows up in that transferring, right? And you're going to have to be okay with a little measure of inefficiency, especially as you grow. Once you scale to the point where you can invest in that fully automated end-to-end, that has all of the access management protocols that the bigger companies have and things like that, then fine. But you're going to have to hold a risk threshold, hopefully offloading most of that liability off of to another a third party vendor, a QuickBooks, or
yeah.
those kind of vendors to hold that liability for you.
Yeah, and when you do that, what we've also found is the best practice there is to conduct regular audits,
Yes,
right, of your data to make sure that there isn't some broken link in that chain,
absolutely.
that things are working as they should. A question just came in from the audience, and please, for the audience, please feel free to ask us anything. We're We'd love to answer questions. It makes us much more interactive. So we'd love to hear from you. But one question came in. How are CFOs successfully working alongside their CISOs? What have you seen, Tosa? And then I can give you kind of my perspective as well.
Sure. I'll give you two examples of or maybe three, good, bad, and ugly, right? We'll start from the bad and the ugly, right? The CFOs who treat technology as and I'm not trying to cast aspersions, but treat it as IT, right? Are the ones who are most likely to treat technology as a cost center, not as a business enabler, right? It's a different shift in the mindset. Where it's just, okay, technology to them is just laptops and infrastructure, and it's just cost out of my pocket. What their relationship with the CISO in that case is always going to be, how do I stop money leaving my pocket?
Yes.
Which is wrong. Those who look at technology as a core operating process within your company come at it from a different angle. Then you have a bit more of the enable and control mindset, where your CISO is your subject matter expert. And what the good CISO too, there are also bad CISOs. The good CISO needs to now come along and go, my job is not just to protect information security. My job is also to bring to the CFO the ability to leverage information security to get better at A, B, or C, right? That symbiotic relationship is what the good CFOs do. And also, like we talked about, that business case ROI, constant ROI mindset is like, because the CFO has something the CISO or the CIO will never have, is you should have the fullest picture outside of the CEO. You should have the fullest picture of the full business landscape, and be able to go like, okay, I understand the business case here, but this either cannibalizes our business here or enhances our business here, because you're the guardian of the full spectrum of the financial statements. Some of the best I have seen from that CFO, the current, I'll plug him, the current CFO for global technology at JP Morgan is one of those very enabled and control mindset in conjunction with a CIO. And you don't have to be a technologist to do that. You just have to embrace technology as a critical business driver, similar to name any other business driver you have out there.
You know, one of the big changes we made in to enable, to your point, to help us view IT differently, because we knew it, but what really drove home the point was when we moved IT, to your point, like, so that it's not part of kind of G&A. It's actually sits above a contribution margin line and sits in as it's, you know, technology enablers for sales. We have a separate line item. We have technology enablers for marketing, separate line item.
It's part of your cost of revenue.
Exactly. Yeah. It's part of what we call contribution margin, you know, how much each business line is contributing to our EBITDA. That helped us to change how we view IT, how we view technology. Whereas, to your point, before it was just like, oh my God, why are we spending so much money on IT? Now it's like, oh, okay, that's part of marketing. Got it. Right? Like, we need to invest in marketing in order to drive sales. We need sales technology in order to, you know, drive up the top line. So just that basic change in how financial reporting was in financial reporting really changed a lot of decisions and discussions around technology for us.
Yeah, I actually like how you just phrased it out, because that makes that ROI a little bit easier, right? If I have its marketing technology, I can go, okay, marketing wants to spend $1 million on this new fancy UX design search engine and all that stuff, and our marketing whatever your return metric is, our sales tick up only went up by 2%. Is it worth it, right? Then you start, trying to balance, because money is not infinite, right? If it was, we'll be out of business. I like the way it's apportioned, and then you can aggregate everything up to the full business and see, how much of a contributor technology spend across the full business was to the bottom line.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that was just a simple change that helped. I mean, for just to kind of go back to the question on CISOs and how have CFOs really, what I've seen has been, to your point, Tosa, working, having that kind of transparent conversation, having that communication line, but also helping helping them make their business case for the investments that they need helps a lot, right? And then it's also what I've also found is as CFOs, a lot of we spend a lot of time talking about budgets and costs and all that, but one of the easiest ways to make an impact that people are often, skimping on is just training and awareness, saying, hey, this is important. Make sure that, everybody in the company knows what CISOs are doing or what the cybersecurity measurement is doing. And here are some of the, how we report on incidents, how we actually put controls in. Just that communication line and making that broader helps a lot. Because I think a lot of times people just feel like, hey, they're just kind of sitting in the background, doing things in the background, but here's how you can help. So engaging the whole company.
Agreed.
Okay. So we got another question on the same topic, so I'll just keep going on that from the audience. What are the most effective investments for security improvements? So Tosa, I'll let you take it, and then I'll jump to what I've seen.
That depends on the industry, size of your business, your maturity phase, right? But I think some table stake investments, regardless of how big or small you are critical. Information security governance, right? Ensuring that you've made the right investment to understand who has access to your data. Building the walls, not just to keep things from coming in, but quite frankly, to keep things from going out. A simple, I think Microsoft has this as part of some of their Outlook. If you're sending an email out with an attachment, right, there's a flag, right? Just so some table stakes on InfoSec governance, I think are critical to look at, regardless of size or industry, what have you. The other thing, and this one is probably more an annual recertification, is looking at your risk management, but more importantly, your risk management tolerance, right? What information risk can we? You're not going to solve for everything. You're not going to solve for 100%, right? So what is that threshold that you can absorb that still keeps you as a viable entity? If people's phone numbers get leaked, for instance, right, does that cripple you? I don't know. Maybe not. Depends on your industry, right? But if folks' social security numbers get leaked, that's a whole different ballgame, right? So what is that sensitivity threshold that you are okay with absorbing? Then once you're determined, okay, our threshold is 80%. I'm making numbers up. Then the remaining 20%, you now look at it as like, is there a way I can mitigate this 20% further? Can I, like we talked about, offload some of that risk to a third-party vendor? Can I offload some of that risk due to outsourcing with some outside counsel to ensure that our contractual language indemnifies you as the small business from certain things occurring. If you can get those two things as table stake, I think those are critical. Then you can go on, as you get larger, incident management becomes important. How do you respond to the inevitable breach that will happen? And how do you continually develop internal security processes and programs to the awareness part you talked about within the company, training, and constantly ensuring that your people are information security managers or officers, many information security officers or their own, because all it takes is one single point of failure for everything to go, get shut down.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add here is backups, right? Like having an adequate backup and kind of recovery, whatever you want to call it, data backup and recovery kind of protocol in place is also really important. I would also say, some of the other things I've seen across when I was a fractional CFO and also here is, of course, like some of the best ways to protect is to get cybersecurity insurance that helps. It's not typically that out of whack, but it helps you kind of provide some level of protection. Some of the other kind of, a lot of the investments I've seen have been around digital payments, end-to-end encryption, and cloud-based kind of accounting software. And then, of course, spending the time to do regular audits on anything that goes out of your door on your processes. So that's kind of where we've seen it.
One thing I'll add, and this is not necessarily a small business problem, I've actually seen this in larger entities, is your data source. Having we call it a golden lake, right? Or one single source of truth, where it makes it easier to guard a singular source of truth versus a disparate lakes. But B, everything, if you build your information, it's the old computer garbage in, garbage out. If you build your program, InfoSec program, cybersecurity program, on quite frankly, a polluted or fractured data lake, the house cannot stand if the foundation has cracks in it already. So one of the first things I probably would look at is ensuring that data source is clean, is hygienic, and the points of entry to that data source is as minimal as possible. Then you can build up on top of that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a really good point. And, with small companies, especially when they are doing smaller acquisitions, that source of truth is so hard to get at, but investing and making sure there are some guardrails around protecting that makes life so much easier.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have another question from the audience, which I think, switching tax a little bit to go broad, but addressing kind of what you were talking about at the very, very beginning. What role does AI play with small and medium, mid-sized businesses and the finance kind of infrastructure? You've seen?
I'm going to use an answer that is very consulting. It's to be determined. There are a lot of use cases on AI out there, on generative AI. And quite frankly, the use cases for a lot of businesses, regardless of size, is still something that is being fleshed out. One thing I would say AI can do, let's go back to those rote, repeatable processes that exist within the company, billing and collection, invoice generation could be something that would be an applicable use case for AI within a small business. As you bring in AI, one also has to understand that comes with an investment or an awareness of privacy, or an investment and awareness of, like we talked about, the cybersecurity piece. The other thing I would say, AI from a use case perspective is already happening in your whatever interface the small business uses to talk to their consumer base, right? So the chatbots more and more when on the customer landing page for a lot of businesses are getting very, very good at almost eliminating the need for a live agent, right? Which from a cost perspective would help a small business. So some low-hanging fruit that have already been proven, your UX user interface is most likely something AI would help with. Some rote processes that probably don't have or are not too dependent on core financial data as of now, until you can get that cybersecurity and privacy part locked down, would be a use for AI. And if your business is in a software as a service domain, I'm sure there's some product enhancements that AI could easily plug into in terms of customization of the product for the consumer. I can think of 2 or 3 easy AI product enhancements that would be applicable to a small or mid-sized business.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, some of the if you think about the biggest kind of areas of concern for CFOs of small, mid-sized companies, a lot of it is around financial analysis, reporting, financial kind of data cleanup, to your point, but also it's around cash flow management, cash flow prediction. And honestly, to me, that's one of the big areas where I can see that happening very quickly is cash flow kind of scenarios, or, hey, here's how, based on your spending trends, here's where we're seeing a lot of expenses, and make sure that you have the right ones. Some of the others are, I've also seen AI, or heard people talk about AI being used for things like fraud detection, controls, making sure controls are in place, or being that first line of, hey, there's a breach, or there's something that is missing, or here's how we can prevent it, and being kind of that proactive prevention. I think that is really interesting. Some of the more analytical things, I think, like you said, it's to be determined. I don't know if it can really, I think I haven't seen a viable kind of, hey, here's how to make strategic decisions, all the puts and takes and all the kind of things that you need to understand for true financial analysis. I don't know. And capital management, I haven't seen much yet, but I think there is a lot to be done in just the routine tasks.
Yeah.
And also just predictions.
Predictions. I think that's a use case, because AI is supposed to be able to consume, digest, and output large data sets more than we can, right? AI is not the decision maker, right? So you, as a finance professional, still have to read the output and determine what the decision or the strategic insight is supposed to be. But in things like trying to predict seasonality, churn, market trend analysis, right? Do you need to take price? Is there an opportunity for price increases or what have you? Are you losing market share? Those large data set questions,
Right.
Are something that AI should be able to do. Again, the only question one will have now is how much access to your internal information do you need to give the system, and what's your risk management threshold on
Right.
having a AI
Yeah.
look under the covers, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we have 5 minutes. I just want to ask one last question, Tosa. And this was an audience question, but this was something I was going to kind of end with as well. So perfect timing on that question. What are the biggest challenges SMB finance will face this year? The audience was asking specifically to this year. I was more broader. What are the biggest challenges?
I think you touched on it. It's capital, it's cash flow, right? It's because a lot of the technology solutions, especially the newly evolved ones, are not quite yet at a financial level, and that makes it easily attainable for a lot of small to mid-sized businesses. You have to have a certain scale of business to be able to justify a certain investment. Your ability to deploy cash let me use the analogy. If I need a car, you need a car. I can only afford a 200,000-mile car, but it gets me from A to B.
Right.
A small business finance professional needs to be able to sit with your CFO, your CISO, your COO, and let them understand that just getting from point A to B is okay. I don't need a Tesla right now.
Yeah.
Eventually, God willing, we'll grow to the point where we can afford the Tesla. But that's it. It's being able to deploy limited cash resources to ever more expensive technological applications until AI gets to the point where it supposedly reduces technological and the barriers of entry into those technological solutions for a small business. But that's going to be the main thing. It's knowing what to spend your dollar on that gives you the most bang for your buck without breaking the bank.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I would have to agree as well. I think capital is the biggest kind of challenge. As always, this isn't new. The right sizing and making sure you're making the right investment without losing sight for scalability, because we are entering, I mean, it just seems to be that, with everything happening, not just in finance, but on the business side, it's getting more and more complex. So even if, putting aside business growth, it's just a more and more complex business area. I would also add, one of the biggest ones that we always have challenges with is talent, having the right people. Finance talent is very tough to come by, and having the right finance talent is always difficult, and it's going to continue to be. I don't see that ebbing anytime soon. The dearth of good financial talent who are willing to dig in, and really get into the nuts and bolts in a SMB. You don't have the benefit. There's no net here in SMB companies. It's typically a skeletal finance staff. And we have to make do with that skeletal finance staff. So everybody is doing things that they may not want to, you're jumping in, making entries sometimes. And you maybe, I've done that as CFO.
Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges we face as a finance team. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think the development of, once you get that one or two finance folks who have that capacity to expand and become that CFO that we talked about, Leaders like you, it's up to them to invest in that talent.
Yeah, exactly.
It will pay back in ways you don't know.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Pay it forward. Yeah. But anyway, we're at time. The questions were wonderful. I know we didn't get to all of them, but please reach out on LinkedIn for any of the audience where I'm happy to chat. And thank you so much, Tosa. This was wonderful. It was wonderful chatting and
Same here.
great answers, great experience to share.
Absolutely. This was fun. I appreciate you all listening to us go back and forth. And yeah, like Shwetha said, the questions were on point. Thank you.
Right. And thank you both for such a great session. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event.